Hello ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode in which we will be talking about 10 games like Kirby for the NES. So you're probably wondering how I came about making this list. Well, I proposed the existence of a genre of game known as a gimmick platformer. To clarify what I mean, think about Kirby. It's kind of a basic platformer in some ways, except that it has a nice distinguishable gimmick, the ability to use enemy powers. Well, I think that there are other games that could exist in a similar vein. I basically propose a genre where there is some sort of gimmick to the gameplay that makes it unique. I've also noticed that there is something to the art in these games that makes them look really good. I know Kirby already looks good, but these aren't too shabby either. Now, these games have a cutesy aesthetic and have some sort of gimmick to their gameplay. Or at least that is what I'm suggesting. Not every game on this list perfectly matches that ideology, so I'll explain as we go. Still, I do want to say that since these games are in order from least like Kirby to most, its position on the list should already reveal a thing or two about the games we're talking about today. I think of games where there's some sort of mechanic that is more interesting than just shooting or hitting the enemy in front of you as being more of a gimmick platformer. Think of Klonoa, where you use the enemies to double jump and attack. So, let's look at what games fit into this general category. But we're talking about these games in order from least like Kirby to most like Kirby. Although this won't exactly be the order that I recommend the games in, like last time was. That was easy because they happen to line up. This time, at the end, I will explain a recommendations list. I also want to point out that, in my opinion, character swapping is a gimmick, even more so if it's on the fly. Even more so if it's multiple characters. I also consider form changes a gimmick as well, so that might tip you off a little bit as to where we're going here. I'm not gonna necessarily be ranking these games by how closely their gimmick is to Kirby's, but more like how interesting and unique their gimmick is. So, some of these games feature similar abilities to Kirby, but they might be lower than games that are more like Kirby in their quality and polish, and how well their gimmick is implemented. If that makes any sense. With all that being said, let's get to it. Cocoron. So, this one's interesting because the actual gameplay is not overly complex, which is why it's at the highest up spot, but if you can understand what we're looking at here, I think your mind will be blown. This game, which was created by the original designer of Mega Man, has a huge gimmick that is so impressive and cool on the NES. So yeah, you're seeing the gameplay. This is what it looks like. It's not too crazy. That's where you're wrong. You know why? This main character is my totally original character named Loey, my OC. And so is this, and yes. This game features a very cool character creator for a platformer game on the NES, or Famicom to be specific, but it is such a cool thing to have actually pulled off. As you can see, I'm playing a translation here that was made by this name on screen. It's great, and the game is pretty fun. It can be a pretty difficult game. The way that it works is you can pick any level you want to in any order, which makes sense with the Mega Man creator on board. For every level you beat, you get to make another character for your save, and you choose between them when you play. So you're gonna want to figure out the best character for getting through a level and defeating the boss, and build a character for each level. It's a really interesting gameplay loop. It's so freaking cool, too. It's at the very bottom of this list because despite the ability to add flight to your character or choose your weapon, overall the platformer gameplay is pretty basic. But I just think that the multiple playable custom characters gimmick sells it for me. You have all kinds of options for weapons to try out, and you can give each of your playable characters a different weapon and equip them for the job. Which head you pick, which body you pick, and which weapon you pick will make for a pretty unique character, because the head and body can bring their own abilities to the table, but the head and body contribute to how much you weigh, which I think affects your jump height, and the health you'll have for that character. Then the weapons, like I said, are all pretty different. Since I'm a fan of the best Gundam series ever made, Gundam Wing, I faithfully recreated Wing Gundam in the game, and they are the best character, obviously. I also created Gigi, who I couldn't faithfully make a Christmas snake, but I did have them save Christmas, so that I think counts for something. They cleverly have detached the weapon from the body so that the sprite work could stay simple, but it isn't excruciatingly noticeable. I just think it's awesome they decided to do this, and they really successfully followed through. What a cool game. Also, in that Christmas level, I gotta say I felt terrible because they introduce you to these penguins that are attacking you, and so you beat them and move on. But then you get further into the level, and it turns out you're just entering their homes, and at first I was like, oh, that's so cute, and then I realized, oh, That's so mean. It's great though. This game was challenging your conceptions of heroism and defeating your enemies long before Undertale ever did. These penguins are just defending their homes, and then I blow through with my smiley face trying to save Christmas, leaving destruction and gore in my wake. The bosses that I fought in the game were pretty difficult, but I can attest that the right tool for the job goes a long way here. This game is tough, but it's very fun, so you should absolutely give it a try. Maybe don't kill the penguins if you can help it though. New Zealand story. Years and years ago now, like 15 years ago, I came across this weird little game for the DS called New Zealand Story, and I thought it was pretty odd, but I loved the aesthetic. It always reminded me of the Kirby look, and yellow's my favorite color, so I was pretty much sold. Now, the question is, why is this so far up on the list then? Unlike Kirby's ability to steal enemies' powers, our little Kiwi friend named Tiki has a bow and arrow. And that's pretty much it. You can also get a fire cane and ride vehicles, which I would argue is something of a gimmick, but nothing so crazy that Mario hasn't done it before. You can flap to fall slower, but Kiwis can't fly, so you're gonna need to apprehend a balloon or a spaceship, or whatever you can find. I have always loved this game. It's so cute and so fun that I felt like I needed to recommend it in this video, but it not having much of a main gimmick did put it high up on the list. The vibes are definitely there though. The feel in the hands reminds me of Kirby in a good way. When I was much younger, I always thought I'd like to go ahead and talk about this game in some way to describe its experience relative to Kirby. So I'm happy to finally be here after all these years. It's good, I enjoy it. Much like Kirby, when you go underwater, you get little diving gear equipment, it's so cute. Commandeering balloons to make it to new parts of the level is always a lot of fun. And when you do find upgrades, it's really exciting. It's a little bit challenging, but by no means too hard or anything. The final boss is something of a pushover with the UFO though, from what I can tell. I never made it that far on the NES version, but gameplay online reassures me. I recommend it though for sure. The game consists of Tiki saving all his Kiwi fellows from a leopard seal named Wally that wants to eat them all. Obviously, being as cute as it is, it must be a good time, right? Felix the Cat. This game isn't too crazy. It's a relatively straightforward platformer, but it does feature form changes, and is also just a super solid game. Just while recording footage, I got carried away and played through almost half the game. I'm glad I did though, because there is even more here than I was aware of from previous attempts to play through the game. Now, in the past I've played this game a little because I love Felix the Cat, but the problem is I don't care for the quote-unquote bag iteration of the character. I always liked how Felix would use his body parts, or his tail, or exclamation points that appear over his head, and things like that. He could use his tail as a hook and swing across gaps, or anything that he needed he could already do. I thought the bag was kinda meh. It felt like it took away from Felix's innate toon logic that he was so powerful with. The bag was kind of plot relevant though, because the evil scientist that he fights wants the bag, so it creates the conflict. The bag itself can transform into practically anything and can be used for whatever. Which, sure, but Felix kind of already could, but gosh darn it, I love Felix the Cat, and the truth is, I was missing out. This game's fun, I enjoyed it a lot. So, there are a lot of bag forms in the game which affect your movement and affect your attack. On land, the majority of forms are the default bag, out of which pops a big boxing glove, which is decently effective, but there's a reason it's the base form. The second form is a magic top hat and magic wand that shoots stars out around Felix, and is great for coverage in all directions. Next, you have a motorbike. I think. It shoots out a projectile straight ahead that doesn't go super far, but it definitely has more range than just the stars and the boxing glove, so it's pretty good for keeping yourself safer. And last, but certainly not least, there is an actual tank. I do mean a tank. It's awesome. The tank fires in an arc and has to be strategically planned for an angle, but it goes a lot further, and it bounces. And overall, the controls feel great. I felt completely in control and had a pretty easy time playing through the levels that I did. As you make your way through the levels though, the context as to what form you will take changes. For example, you have these high up levels that are sky oriented, wherein the base form is an umbrella, still with the boxing glove though. The second form now is a hot air balloon, where you throw sandbags at an angle downward. And lastly is an actual plane that fires, spheres straight ahead, that I presume are bullets. Then you have two sets of water forms, on the water and in the water. On the water is a boat with the boxing glove again, followed by a dolphin that shoots, I guess bullets again, I don't know. And in the water you have scuba gear, and the boxing glove again. Then you ride a turtle and he shoots bubbles, or arguably burps. I don't know, do turtles burp? I guess they shoot bullets out of their mouth. The more you know. This turtle is so adorable though. Until you shoot said bubble, and it's basically a jump scare. Then you get a giant Felix-shaped submarine that shoots actual missiles. And one that I didn't even get into in my playtime, a spaceship that fires a more sporadic bullet. Felix might actually just be a war veteran or something because this is getting crazy. So the way it works is the following. You collect these weirdly forlorn Felix heads, and once you collect enough, they will pop into milk. And the milk is a pickup that keeps you going. Your health kind of steadily deteriorates as you go, and you have to keep drinking milk to keep it up. Occasionally, when you defeat an enemy and or pick up a Felix head, a heart could pop out and need to be picked up. Getting this heart upgrades your form. Taking damage downgrades your form. Honestly, it's pretty awesome. This game's actually pretty great. That's why it's pretty nice that it recently got a re-release for, well, $25. Look, unless you're into collecting, maybe consider waiting for a price drop. It's a fun game, but it is an hour or so long. For extra value proposition, they did throw in the GB version though, which is kind of the same game but with fewer levels and slightly altered level design from what I can tell. But it's in black and white. Okay, sure. Just, I'm glad for preservation. I've seen much more egregious costs for things like this, because the truth is, it might look like a flat repackaging of the game, but it takes a lot of work to fine-tune and create the perfect emulation of the game, which a lot of people don't realize. It isn't as effortless as they make it look, but I still think 25's a little high. Let's see. How much can a copy for the NES cost, right? Probably like $20, so maybe it's fine. Oh. Okay, the game's actually a little over $80. Never mind, this re-release isn't too shabby, all things considered. In the cards, I'll include a link to a video by someone who has worked on re-releases like this, and you can form your own opinion. Either way, fun game, I really like it. Pick up your own copy if you want it. Bio Miracle Bottle, Bokutte Upa. You ever played Super Mario Sunshine? Well, this game's gimmick directly reminds me of the Yoshi mechanics in Super Mario Sunshine. When you hit people with your baby rattle, they inflate and start to float away, and then you can use them as a platform. Which, as it predates Mario Sunshine, this is kind of a cool and interesting original mechanic. Also, this game is actually adorable. I mean, look at the baby. They do a cute little focus face when you attack, and when you crawl around, they smile. It's adorable. Also, I was a little perturbed when, in a 2D platformer, there's sort of fall damage as a mechanic. I don't think you actually take damage, but you are staggered upon landing. You know, I thought about it, and it occurred to me that probably a good precedent to set that you shouldn't let babies fall from high places. So, while it is a bit frustrating, I think it's totally fair. Overall, the game is so cute. It makes me feel joyful. The main character reminds me of my sweet little daughter, who is just so happy. It's fun though. The level design isn't crazy, but learning and mastering the mechanics of riding enemies around to make it to higher places and collect things is very engaging. I do like it. It's a pretty straightforwardly designed game, but there is something kind of clever about the system of riding enemies. Like, in a way, somewhat similar to Mario Sunshine. Color affects the way each enemy acts when it's hit, except it's the color of the enemy instead of Yoshi's vomit. Some fly straight ahead, some fly up, some fly at an angle. You get the idea. It makes for some situations you actually have to think about sometimes. The boss fights in particular can be very fun and, well, not too challenging. They are interesting, and they make you feel like you've overcome something when beating them. There is a translation of this game out there, but I couldn't get it working, so I'm not sure how it is. All around, I like it. It's a fun, cute little game. Ufouria. So I'm sure this game came to mind when I started talking about multiple playable characters. Everything you've heard about this game is totally true. It's a certified banger of a platformer. Being able to quickly and easily switch between playable characters as new abilities are unlocked is super fun. And the game is also brimming with personality. In the English translated version, you play as Bop Louie, a little snowman looking bro who is a pretty standard platforming staples, but is so thoroughly animated that he looks great. Eventually, you get a new ability called Bop Louie's Secret Weapon. that lets you shoot your head at enemies in a very disturbing moment the first time you see it. The text box for this power-up does not sufficiently warn you of what is to come. So as Bob Louie, you're exploring this strange realm and trying to find out what happened to your friends, and then get everybody home. Cool. Except that each of your friends has to be beaten in a boss fight to remember you. My favorite is Shades. He's so cool. He's a ghost guy that jumps high and floats down slowly, so he's good for crossing gaps. You also have Freon Leon, so named because he can walk on ice, and Gil, a fish who can swim and break certain walls. Each character has a lot of animation work done on them, with tons of unique poses for each thing they do, like climbing and crawling and attacking, etc. Speaking of, I thought this game was mondo hard at first, until jumping on an enemy actually killed one once. Which then eventually led me to believe it was one of those types of games where you have to hold down the whole time to hurt enemies when you jump on them, and I had happened to accidentally do so. Sure enough, it is. It's a lot of fun though, and I've managed to make it pretty far into the game without having a manual at all for guidance, just whatever the game may tell me. It's pretty good at expressing itself. I do like this system that just tries to point you in the direction you should probably be going though. That's just a clean way to handle it. I can try to ignore it if I want, but I probably won't get far anyways. As you go, you collect a few tools to make life better. A map, a compass to show you where items are in the map, and an object that lets you see the location of the key you are looking for. You find a door that you think will lead you home, but it's locked at the start, and a handful of other useful bits and bobs. Also, the game looks and sounds great. I like the mechanic of defeating enemies, having a chance to drop this sad little face that you can throw at the other enemies. It's just kinda quirky. It makes the game feel pretty Ufouria. You know what I mean? You also have these things that have drool dripping down that you climb on. That's just so unique and funny. This game's just awesome. And that's the thing though, it feels more like its own thing than out and out Kirby, so that's why it isn't more towards the end of the list. I feel like it has enough of a gimmick to put it down this far, but it just doesn't have as much of a Kirby feel, while still feeling incredibly polished and fun, you know? It's easy to recommend this game though because it's certifiably awesome and better yet, just in the past year or so got a sequel. In the sequel though, we do switch back to all the original Japanese character names and designs, which somewhat disappointingly means that we're losing out on Bob Louie and Freon Leon, probably the two best characters in the game in my opinion. Instead, we get the original Japanese Hebe and Ochan. I kind of wish we could opt to swap them for Bob Louie and Freon Leon because Freon Leon is such a dopey guy, and I love him. I also miss Bob Louie too, but it is what it is. If you play Ufouria and like it, consider checking out the sequel. It looks adorable, and I'm excited to play it at some point myself. The felt graphics remind me of Yoshi's Woolly World and Crafted World, and that's not a bad thing. You should definitely check out the first game though. I'm interested in the sequel myself. Apparently it's like a sequel / remix of the first game, with partially and cleverly randomized maps. It's a bit wild. QBoy. Shout out to the channel Poger for bringing this game to my attention. It was this game that partially inspired me to pursue this video at all, actually. It made me curious as to what NES games that fit this vibe that I had missed before. I wouldn't say it's a perfect game or anything, but it is truly a pretty fun little experience. You have a meter at the bottom of your screen that tells you your energy in little pips. Basically, when you fire a bubble at someone, you use half a pip. But when you use it to jump again in the air, you use up a whole pip. They have to be slowly recharged after use. But if, for whatever reason, you need to go all out and use every pip in a row, you have to be very careful because this will stagger you for a moment, because it's too much for our little QBoy to handle. The platforming basically follows that you would have to figure out what to do in a given situation, if you should attack, extra jump, or go all out and risk the stagger. It's really cool and makes for some pretty good puzzle mechanics. There is an item that lets you use your abilities without running out for a brief span though, so you can fly over large gaps. It's a very cute game, and I'm happy to say that it fits on this list. If you like Kirby but wouldn't mind an extra emphasis on challenging puzzle platformers, then be my guest. This game is a good-looking, fun, and totally unlicensed title for the system. It also features multiple playable characters, but from what I can tell, they both play the same. So I'm not sure why they're both here, but I mean, okay, I'm glad they're here. The level design is pretty solid, and the gimmick is pretty solid. The art is pretty solid. What a pretty solid little game. Asmik Kun Land. Yeah, this game barely made the list. It's a fine game, it's pretty challenging with a one-hit death type deal, and its gimmick is pretty weak. The way it works is you have what looks like a fart ability, and every person you fart on turns into an egg. I haven't exactly figured out what you get for collecting all the eggs per se, but the mechanic's a little bit interesting. You sort of end up with a kill confirmed mechanic where every enemy you kill has to be collected too. I also think that's kind of interesting for a platformer, but I wouldn't say it's intrinsically super engaging on its own without some more notable mechanics to go along with it. So I looked it up on the internet, and that led me to play the game a little bit further, because the eggs are apparently not created from farts, but steam blowing out of his nose. I'm glad that I decided to pick up this game further because, as it turns out, you might just be God. Using the eggs that you collect, you can fly, freeze time, roll through enemies, become immortal, or, the cheaper but longer lasting, take an extra hit. Breathe underwater for a certain amount of time, shoot fans out at an angle, or shoot fireballs. So I was playing this game a la carte and just picking up all these eggs without ever realizing that there was so much more to be experienced. This game's gimmick isn't just the eggs, it's the shop anywhere system that makes you ultra powerful. This actually makes sense with an article I came across that I'll link down below that's very interesting and fun. It basically describes Asmik Kun Land as a game that takes place from the childlike perspective of Asmik Kun, and I skimmed through it and thought it was a neat read. It makes sense then that if it's something like Asmik Kun playing pretend, you would have all these crazy abilities that basically give you godlike power. This game was actually going to be the first one in the video because if the only gimmick was the egg system, then I would have had to go ahead and label it as something of a weaker gimmick, but now I'm totally on board and I love that it is more developed than what I thought it was. Which is why now you're seeing it further up the list. This game is very conceptually cool and it's so adorable. I love the pastels and crayons and doodles. I just think it's so cute. So yeah, I definitely think it deserves a spot on this list. Little Nemo Dream Master. Oh boy, if I said that QBoy was a puzzle platformer, then this one is too. QBoy's a lot more skill-based though, whereas Little Nemo's a lot more exploration and puzzle-based. Skill is needed, but determination is way more important here. Now, I have either completely beaten this game or beaten everything but the final boss, and I'll tell you, it's tough. In the first level, it's sort of like explore the area and collect keys. All good. In the second level, unless you want to spend forever exploring and you have crazy IQ, the game is basically like, whip out a guide, friend. Here's my advice. If characters in the game talk to you, seriously consider what they're saying, because this guy talks to you right at the beginning of the second level. If you don't critically analyze what he says, you are setting yourself up for confusion. You're supposed to drown yourself in this little pond right here, because if you do, you end up quite literally under the water. You find another person that tells you what the first person should have just told you, which is that you need to make friends with the lizard in a tree. How does that work? Well, there are two types of creatures in this game. Creatures that can be friends, and creatures that can't, basically. Typically, the creatures with googly eyes can be friends, and the other creatures can't. How do you make friends, though? You throw candy at them. Little Nemo has a bunch of pieces of candy that can be thrown out in a lob. If you hit would-be friends, they will start eating the piece that you threw. If you hit other enemies, they just get stunned for an all-too-brief moment before going about murdering you. Then what happens next is confusing and makes the rules of this reality inconsistent. Each creature behaves differently. I mean, they all fall asleep, I think, and then when you jump on them to ride and take advantage of their movesets, something happens. The gorilla lets you ride his back. No problem, now it makes sense. It's everyone else that's strange. Let's work our way through them from the least bizarre to the most bizarre. Like I said, the gorilla, normal. You just ride him. The lizard is asleep, and I guess you're piloting his body parts through arcane magic? I guess that's a little weird, but oh my god! He wears the mole like a skin suit. The mole's open mouth and his head is a hoodie hanging out the back of his costume. It's disgusting. Oh my god, he just climbs inside the frog's mouth? What? That's incredibly disturbing. Is he puppeting the frog from within its body? It's just terrible. And then there's the bee. It's the same. He's manipulating the bee's limbs from inside his mouth, like operating it like a puppet. This is just a horrifying concept. You know what else though? Kinda like Kirby abilities in a way. That's the gimmick. Very cool. This game is really hard. I'll explain the rest of the level earlier for you to see if you can figure out what I mean. After drowning yourself and talking to this guy, he tells you that you need to find a lizard friend who's up in the trees. So you go back up and find this gorilla, feed him candy, and then spend forever trying to dodge these falling fiends to try and climb this freaking tree. Once you do, you find the lizard, which, with the lizard, you can finally fit through this small gap, after which you can find a bee fellow to commit unholy acts to. Oh, glorious, he can fly. That means I can get up here, I think, and get the last key and get out. Oh, did you not realize there was a limit on flight because there wasn't enough room to test it out, so you fall to your death? Guess what 5-minute process you have to repeat from the beginning? It's brutal. It's more about just figuring out where all the keys are and being able to get them. The end of the level is not typically the biggest challenge. It's a pretty fun game, and at the end of it, you get a magic wand to fight bosses with. But it can be pretty challenging to use correctly because it only shoots out at an angle. It is a fun game though. It is a time sink to figure out everything you need to do to get through a level, and if you aren't interested in doing that, but think the experience looks fun, just look up a guide and don't feel too bad about it. It is fun to beat without a guide, I can attest to that, but that was also back when I had more time on my hands than I do now. Armadillo. Fun fact, did you know that the word armadillo means little armored one? Which, once you know that, the name makes a lot of sense. Anyways, the game itself is pretty good. The gimmick is that you can roll into a ball, making our protagonist, who goes by the name Billy the Shell, a 3-banded armadillo. Because those are the only kinds that can actually go full ball mode like Samus Aran. And since it is not very hairy, I'd say he's a Brazilian 3-banded armadillo. Sorry, can you tell that I searched armadillos after deciding to share that fun fact? The music in this game is noticeably clunky. The title music just incorporates complete silence, and it sounds like the chip isn't working correctly. Wait a minute. The music can be good and fun, but the choices are very strange. The sound other than that is fine. The sound effects aren't bad or anything. Alright, let's talk about the gameplay. The graphics are nice, but maybe it's just me, the frame rate's weird. So the gimmick for the game is rolling into a ball, right? Armadillo, you know, that whole bit. That makes sense, right? Yeah, it is. Except that you also have form changes. I'm not understanding how they work in canon, but you can transform into a kangaroo, a fish, a bird, a snail. There's also an umbrella you can get. To quickly summarize, each standard form lets you turn into a ball that can bounce around and roll into enemies, and also features a wall jump. Kangaroo lets you jump higher. Fish lets you swim faster. Bird is temporary, but lets you fly anywhere you want. Snail lets you climb walls and curl up into your shell. And the umbrella lets you hold up to slow your descent. On top of that, there's apples, and they make you shrink to a tiny size, so that's good. Certain areas can only be accessed from the tiny size, so it's good to get a feel for that system. It's a pretty darn fun game. I'd call it underrated, but it actually has a fairly moderately known bootleg version where you play as Mario instead. So maybe people are aware of it? It's gone by many names though. Super Mario Bros. 4, Mario 6, Mario and the Great Armadillo Caper, that kind of jazz. All this to say, very fun game. Also, the final boss is Evil Moomin with a hat and armadillo shell. So that's cool. It's definitely a good little game though. It has a translation available if you want to play it in English like I did, and that translation was made by this person. So next up, I'm going to start talking about the games that I did find that I thought were interesting, but I didn't necessarily think fit the list quite well. So we're going to do a runner-up section before we move on to the final one. Little Samson. Here it is. When I said multiple playable characters, I'm sure that also made some people think of Little Samson. Well, let's talk about it. It's a very polished little game that features 4 playable characters with their own abilities, but the thing is, in the hands, it feels more like a Mega Man game, which is why it's just a runner-up. Like I said, this list is mostly comprised of vibes, and while New Zealand Story didn't have a strong gimmick, it really did fit the vibe. Whereas here, the gimmick, but different vibe, you know? Hey, that's just how I feel about it. Obviously, you might think it does. Either way, I do recommend it. It's a very fun game that deserves a play. It's very rare though, so I don't know about looking out for a physical copy per se. Don Doko Don 2. So this game is a fun time and is definitely very cutesy, but it's just a little more Mario than it is Kirby, you know? I kind of want to include it because it's actually a very fun game, but if the gimmick were the ability to pick up and throw enemies, that's just a little bit too close to Mario's moveset. I do like the hammer though. It's a fun mechanic that's pretty well done. You have some power-ups like shooting fireballs and a couple of other neat things, but ultimately, despite being very cutesy, it kind of just boils down to being a really good, very solid Mario-style platformer. I do like that you can choose the angle you throw enemies at and how it helps for boss fights. It is a fun game. You should definitely give it a try if you're looking for something to play. And lastly, number 1, Mr. Gimmick. Hey, what a twist. This is it. In a video about gimmicks, we're talking about Mr. Gimmick. Who would have figured? And just like that, here it is. Another cult hit from Sundoft. Oh my god, my script says Sundoft. What the heck is Sundoft? Another cult hit from Sunsoft. They were at the top of their game back then, and what do you know? This one also has a modern-day version and a sequel. Apparently, Sunsoft has returned and revived some of their classics and make some new ones. That's really cool. That also makes for 3 games today that have modern counterparts of some kind. That's actually pretty neat, especially for games that had been dormant for so long. This game is a very fun physics platformer. You play as a venerable Mr. Gimmick. Actually, his name is Yumataro. Actually, the game is just called Gimmick in Japan. The translated version is called Mr. Gimmick, which is honestly an adorable name. So that is my preferred title for it. He's a cute little yokai that a young girl's parents come across and think is a toy. He is not. So this weird, why did your boy go all Toy Story on him? Either way, the other toys get jealous of the closeness with the girl, who I'll call Sadie because she doesn't have a name. So during the night, the toys all get together and kidnap Sadie. So Yumataro goes into hot pursuit. You work your way through the game, defeating each toy as a boss fight. Also, like, maybe I'm crazy, but this looks a lot like Tiki the Kiwi, but of course when you make it that far in the game, oh, he is not Tiki, he's a sham, which makes sense because my Tiki is a hero. This guy is an imposter. And a monster. I think I'll call him Ekit. To actually save Sadie though, you're going to have to be committed to the craft. It's gonna take a lot of collecting a hidden object in every single level and beating the game without using any continues. The hidden objects are hidden in very obscure locations, by the way. It's rough stuff. Like, watch this. This is the one in the first level. My advice to you is to just assume that nothing is decorative or set dressing. Everything is a conspiracy. Be paranoid about the level design. You can also collect other objects to spawn instead of just the default star, like a bomb and this weird ball. You can also carry health potions, I think, which is neat stuff. Gimmick pioneered the Estus Flask. Gimmick is the first Soulsborne game. Gimmick's the proto-Demon Souls. Mr. Gimmick actually opened the golf course called Kingsfield that inspired the name of the franchise. Mr. Gimmick himself actually raised Hidetaka Miyazaki. In short, I forgot what we were doing. Back to the video. Mr. Gimmick actually invented the Soul so that the Soulsborne franchise could one day blossom from the mind of Miyazaki. It's a really cute game though. I love the aesthetic, and the star gimmick's really fun. When you charge your star to summon it, you can throw it, and more importantly, you can ride it. Now the angle you throw it is at about a 45-degree angle down in front of you. So if you want to take advantage of riding the star, you're gonna have to be pretty clever about it. For example, if you have a nice flat wall in front of you, it's a pretty straightforward process to do a double jump, because if you space yourself out from the wall just right, you can throw the star and immediately jump on it. Like I said before, you need to utilize a lot of tricks to get to the secret collectibles. Thankfully though, if you do get the secret collectibles, you get a ton of extra lives, so you're less likely to end up having trouble with the no continues part of the whole thing. The boss fights are fun. Like I said, you take on each of the toys and oh my god, this thing is terrifying. What kind of toy is that? But more importantly, the music is a certifiable bop. Have you heard this music? I heard that the European music is downgraded from the Japanese version, and I'm playing the version that released on the Evercade here, and it sounds pretty good to me. All I know is something, 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 Japanese Famicom extra sound channels. Look, the music sounds great, alright? If you've heard that, it is true. The rumors are all true. Great game though, with a great gimmick and a really good puzzle platforming element worked into it for the secret hidden objects. There is some really creative use for the star in this, and will make you feel like a genius if you can figure it out. All that being said though, I love it and I highly recommend it. So, that's it. All the ones that I'm aware of in the quote-unquote gimmick platformer genre on the NES. To rank them from least recommended to most recommended as outright experiences, I'd probably say QBoy, Biomiracle, Cocoron, Asmik Kun Land, Armadillo, New Zealand Story, Little Nemo, Felix the Cat, Mr. Gimmick, and Ufouria. It's hard to put Ufouria any lower than number 1, it's just so much fun. But really, the whole list was hard to arrange. Every game I talked about today is a very fun and solid experience. I think it's pretty worthwhile to try them all. Some can be really hard and may require a guide though. If you like the Pink Puff and the unique experience he brings to the table, then you should definitely give these a try. With that being said, Jesus loves you, and so do I. Tune in next time, and goodbye. Don't forget to go ahead and drop 5 Yumatara stars down below, and subscribe.